My answers will probably be completely different than last night. I don't even remember the questions, but
That's good that we can use them both. Um, well, I'll just give a little quick introduction. So I'm going to interview Robert Carbonneau, or on RAM they call Bob Carbonneau, um, as he gets ready to do a two-man RAM here in about a month. Um, and so we're just going to ask a few questions about what RAM is and why you do RAM and what's the motivation behind that and stuff. So let's start off by, for those that have never seen RAM or have maybe even heard you talk about RAM but really don't understand what RAM means. What is RAM?
RAM is an acronym for the Race Across America, and RAM actually started back in 1981, and it started with a group of just a couple of guys that decided they thought it'd be cool to race their bicycles from the West Coast to the East Coast, and that's exactly what they did. It was just one stage. They basically started on the Pacific Ocean and all raced the same route to the Atlantic Ocean. And since 1983, or since 1981, the race has taken a whole lot of different routes, anywhere from the Oregon, Washington area to South Carolina, to where currently where it leaves from Oceanside, California, and races to Annapolis, Maryland. It's basically one stage. So a lot of people think that, you race for 4 or 5 hours a day and then everybody sleeps and gets up the next morning and starts again. But it's one stage, so it's a 24/7 race from the West Coast to the East Coast. And probably, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 years ago, the Race Across America, they decided to start a team division. And the first team division were 4-person teams. And so now what they have is they actually have 3 team divisions: 8-person, 4-person, and 2-person Race Across America teams. And Troy and I are racing in the 2-person division this year.
So that will make for you that you've done the 8-person now, the 4-person, and this will complete the 2-person race for you. Can you tell us a little about those previous experiences with those?
Yeah, the 8-person team, the first one that I rode on was in 2005, and it was just a group of friends and coworkers from work, and we really had no idea what Race Across America was or how to do a team RAM, but we thought it sounded like it'd be something cool to do. So we put together a team. We got some friends and family to crew, and we did the Race Across America. And that year it started in San Diego, California, and went to Atlantic City, New Jersey. And that year our 8-man team finished in 7 days and 15 hours. And we learned a whole lot about RAM, how to do RAM, and a little bit how not to do RAM. And so then in 2007, I asked 3 of that 8-person team if they wanted to join me on a 4-person team. So we put together another team in 2007. 4 of us. We knew a little bit more about RAM, but not a whole lot more. And that year, the race again started that year it started in Oceanside and ended up again in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And we raced and learned a lot about the 4-man RAM. That year we finished in 7 days and 10 hours, and enjoyed it, but it was a very difficult challenge, something that I really wasn't sure whether I was going to really wanted to do again. Then in 2009, I was asked to be on an 8-person team by Jason Weckworth of Team Donate Life. So I made the decision to race on Jason's team, and we had a pretty successful team. I think that year we ended up finishing in about 6 days, 18 hours, I think is about what it was. I don't remember exactly, but a little bit faster than my last 8-person team, but still learning about RAM. And then in 2010, I was asked to be on crew with another Team Donate Life team on the team called Connor's Hope. And it was a team of 8-person team that was really put together, and included on that team was a 12-year-old young man named Connor Ellison who was suffering from liver disease, and it was a way for his family to do something special with their son, as well as raise awareness for organ donation and also for Connor's liver disease. And so then in 2011, I was actually asked to be on another four-person Team Donate Life team, and so I was on that team with Patrick Norville and Ryan Ellison and Steve Hosington, and we ended up finishing that year in 6 days and 13 hours, so slowly getting a little faster. And I really thought maybe that was my last race, and then in 2012 I was asked to be on another four-person Race Across America team with Team Donate Life, and that year it was with Troy Hull, Troy Yost, and Doug Philbrick. And we had a pretty good team that year. We ended up finishing in 6 days, 3 hours, so just slowly getting a little bit faster. Learned a whole lot more about RAM. And Troy Hull and I made a decision last year to attempt a two-person RAM. So that's what we're back for. Today will be my sixth ride across America, a race, but my first two-man team.
So I remember asking you at the end of a four-man race if you had any desire to do a two-man, and you told me no. So now that you're doing a two-man, do you have any desire to do a one-man team? Finish the whole Race Across America, do everything?
Not really, because the dynamics that I think I enjoy about the two-man RAM is more the team aspect of another rider. The solo is a completely different race. The solo race, the solo riders, they actually have 12 days to finish their race. Usually there's about 25 or 30 solo riders that enter the race, and it usually has about a 50% dropout rate that do not make it across the country. And it's just not really something that interests me. I enjoy the team aspect of it. I enjoy the speed of a two-man team, or of the team aspect, and hopefully Troy and I will be able to finish in less than 7 days and have a faster RAM than trying to be out there all by myself for 11 or 12 days.
So this Race Across America, can you tell us a little about the course? How many miles it is, how many states, what it's like to ride your bike across America?
So it's, like I said earlier, it's one stage, and it starts in Oceanside, California, and it basically is broken up into what we call time stations, and there's 57 time stations, and each one of those time stations is approximately 50 miles apart. So it starts off in Oceanside, California. First time station is Lake Henshaw, California. The second time station drops down into the desert. It's called Borrego Springs, California. And we work across time stations, cross into Arizona, in Parker, Arizona, which is a time station, go through Salome, Arizona, Congress, Prescott, through Camp Verde, Flagstaff, and then up through Kayenta, northern Arizona. We touch just the tip of the southern Utah border, and then cross into Colorado. We go up over the Continental Divide at Wolf Creek Pass, which is a great climb, a wonderful climb. Tops out at about almost 12,000 feet, I think about 11.7 or 11.9. And then we head across Colorado. We've got two more pretty good climbs in Colorado before we hit the eastern edge of Colorado, or the eastern side of Colorado, of the Rocky Mountains. And that takes us down across Colorado and into Kansas. Across Kansas, 480 miles. It feels like 1,000, but about 480 miles of flat crosswinds, and that's just Kansas. And then from Kansas, we go cross over into Missouri, and then up through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and then into Maryland. And again, about every 50 miles, there's a time station, and a time station is usually a gas station or maybe a Walmart or a motel or a mini mart, or it's some landmark that when we get there, we actually call in, our crew calls in exactly what time it is that our team crossed that time station, and that's how the Race Across America keeps track of the teams going across the country, and that also determines who's in first, second, third place, and etc.
So speaking of the the team aspect of it and the race aspect of it being first, second, and third, is it a traditional race? Do you see your opponents during the race, or how does that work?
Well, the interesting thing about it is a traditional race, But the difference is sometimes your opponents may be 3 or 4 miles away from you, either ahead or behind you, or they may be 100 miles ahead or behind you. So the first couple of years that we did RAM, where we were a little bit slower, we tended to be more towards the back end of the race, and we saw a whole lot more teams. In 2012, when we were 6 days, 3 hours, we actually ended up 5th in our division and 8th among all the teams. So there was only 7 teams ahead of us, and they were spread out enough that once we left California, you know, we saw another team a little bit in Colorado, and that was it. It was just pretty much us and our crew racing across the country. The only way we really knew where we were in relation to other teams was when we would check in at time stations. We'd be able to see how far behind us or ahead of us our next team went through that time station. So while it's a race, it's not a race that you really see a lot of your competitor.
Could you give us a favorite memory of one of the races, doing so many? Is there any point where it really stood out of just what makes you love the race?
Well, I think you know, one time in 2007, there was a boy. He was 9 years old, and he was at one of the time stations watching all the racers come through. And it was late. It was probably 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and his mom had him there, and he had an autograph book, and he was getting autographs of all the RAM racers just because he just thought it was just so cool. And it was pretty neat to visit with him and to sign his autograph book and know that, you know, he had that book, and it meant something special to him, and it made him feel good that we spent some time with him, and that was a pretty neat time in RAM. You know, just riding across the country, some of the nice parts of it are really when you're riding at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, sometimes through the small towns of the Midwest and of the East. It's just this little town, and you know, everybody's asleep, and it's nice and quiet, and the streets are vacant, and you can just kind of cruise through the town, and it's kind of neat to see America a little bit, that sleepy America when the streets roll up at 6 o'clock and everybody goes into their homes. So just lots of good experiences like that, seeing the country.
You talk about the team aspect of it, and we know that this is a two-man team, but how many people will be on the team besides the 2 racers to help you get across the country?
Well, the total team size this year is 13. So that surprises a lot of people when they hear about that. 13 people. We have 11 crew that support the 2 riders. And those crew, they do everything to make this race go. This race is a very difficult race to coordinate and really to ensure that you get the riders, the vehicles, the crew, everybody safely across the United States. So the crew is split up between navigators, between drivers, people helping the riders, working specifically with the riders, watching their nutrition, watching their hydration, making sure that the bikes are in working order. All of this stuff that the crew does in order to get the whole team safely across the country. So I've often said that the most important part of RAM is the crew, because most all the riders are pretty equal. When you really look at a lot of the abilities of all the riders that enter this race, there's not a lot of differences between the actual riders. The real difference many times in the speed of a team has to do with the crew. And 2012, when we finished in 6 days, 3 hours, yeah, we had some pretty good riders, but that was probably the year that the crew came together the best. Navigators, drivers, people looking at bikes, people finding motels for places to stay that night for the crew. All that coordination really came together well, and that's what made 2012 so successful for us.
You talk about how the riders are pretty even and the crew's important. Another important part, having talked to you, is the strategy side of it. Is there anything you can tell us about the strategy side of doing a race that covers 3,000 miles?
You know, the interesting thing about RAM is everybody's got their own strategy, but not a lot of people want to share what they're doing, just because, you know, everything's different for every team. Some teams, they're successful if they do, each rider rode for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and one rider rode 3 hours, the other one slept for 3 hours, and then they just kind of alternated. That works for some teams. Some teams, they may rotate every 15 minutes, and teams may use a variety of that, where they ride for a couple hours or they ride for 15-minute pulls. It all depends. So there's a lot of different strategies to how to do RAM. Just the biggest thing to remember is the most important thing for the riders is rest and recovery, so that when they're on the bike, however long they are, they can ride as fast as they can for that duration.
This year, your benefited charity, this year's charity is Friends of Freedom. What can you tell us about the charity that you're racing for?
Friends of Freedom it's actually an organization that was started by a man by the name of David Haddad. David is not a military veteran, but he wanted to do something to give something back to the servicemen and women that serve the country, both active as well as former or veterans, so active military and military veterans. And so what David did several years ago is he started this group called the Friends of Freedom. And what he does, it's really ran by David himself. He has a small board of directors, but their focus is on putting together either programs or outreach to active military as well as veterans. He several times a year he's traveled over to Afghanistan, where he's provided services for the troops. There's been times back here where he's helped individual military personnel with personal matters and problems that they may have had, where he's helped them with financial things as well as usually goods and services. David has spent time taking veterans that have been wounded and putting on functions for them, such as golf tournaments, or 1 year took them to a football game. In other words, just helping to honor them and giving them those things that typically a government program or some of the other charities aren't going to do. So it was one of those things that what drew me to it a little bit was the fact that a lot of the veterans or a lot of the charities that are associated with veterans are ran by veterans, and you almost have to be a veteran to be a part of it. That's what's really kind of neat about Friends of Freedom and David and this team. This team really is civilians. It's made up of civilians and veterans that are coming together to help fund programs for veterans. And that's really what I liked about it. It was a charity that kind of bridged the gap between the civilian and the veteran.
How does somebody that wants to get behind that cause as well help donate to your race and to the Friends of Freedom cause?
Well, probably the best way to do it is we have our website, which is friendsoffreedomram.com, and so that's all one, spell out Friends of Freedom, and then RAAM.com, and that's our actual race team website. You can go there, and not only will you find out about the riders and the crew, but there's a donate button there. When you go to that donate button, it takes you directly to the Friends of Freedom donate webpage, and you'll be able to donate to them.
So tell us a little bit about you personally, so we can get to know you as we watch you race across the country.
Well, I'm a father of 4 kids, 4 children, all grown and gone. 3 of them married, and we have been married for 33 years to my high school sweetheart. And we have, not only do we have our 4 children, but we have 11 grandchildren. I've worked for Electric Utility, Arizona Public Service, for 31 of those 33 years. I enjoy my family. I enjoy my church service. I'm very active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been involved in youth programs and the Boy Scout program off and on for many, many years. And I really fell in love with cycling probably about 15, 16 years ago. And since then, it's just been something that I really enjoy doing. Kind of brings balance to my life between family, church, work, and that balance of riding my bike.
For somebody that wants to follow the race after it starts, how do they follow along and cheer you on?
Well, there's a couple different ways. One, there's the raceacrossamerica.org website, and if you go straight there, you'll be able to see not only our team, but all of the teams. They have some interactive maps. They also have a list of all the time stations, exactly when everyone crosses the time station, so you'll be able to see what place we're in and where we're at as we're going across the country. I always encourage people to do that because most people are amazed at how fast a couple of people on bicycles can cross the United States. You know, we start Saturday afternoon at noon from Oceanside. By Sunday late afternoon, we're usually leaving Flagstaff, Arizona. By that night, we're heading across the northern Arizona Indian Reservation. And most people think these guys just left yesterday and they're almost finished with Arizona, getting ready to go into Utah. So it's really kind of exciting to follow. Also, our homepage or our webpage, friendsoffreedom.ram.com or friendsoffreedomram.com, will also have some links to be able to direct you to following the race. We're going to be posting on our Facebook page, Friends of Freedom Believe to Achieve. We'll be posting there, as well as the crew posting Instagram and some YouTube videos and those kind of things. So lots of places to follow the race via our web pages.
I challenge somebody to check the map location before you go to bed. Wake up in the morning and come back and see how far they covered while we were sleeping.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
So when does the book come out? The Bob's Keys to Ram. When does the book come out?
You know, I don't know that I'll ever write a book, but what I think I will do is, you know, anybody that is really interested and serious about a future Race Across America team, I'm always willing to share a little bit of my experience. There's some things that I'll kind of keep close to my chest. I think if I ever do this race again, it may be with three of my three sons, Chris, Stephen, and Derek. We may want to take some of those things that the dads learned and apply it in a future Ram, but that's many years down the road.
If somebody said, I've been inspired, I want to jump on a bike and start, what would you tell them?
I tell them to start. I tell them to start slow, have big goals. I remember the first time when I was just starting to ride my bike, when I knew a guy that rode 100 miles on his bike, and I thought that was just pretty amazing. And I never imagined being able to go out and ride 100 miles on my bike. And I just started slow. I just started with 6 miles and 8 miles, and I remember when 12 and 15 miles was a milestone for me, and I felt pretty good when I finished that. Never imagined that someday I'd be riding on a two-man team 3,000 miles across the country, which means that between Troy and I, each one of us have to cover 1,500 miles in a week. Each rider has to do about 220 miles a day in order for us to get less than 7 days. I never imagined that there would be a day that I might be able to ride 220 miles a day for 7 days in a row. But in about a month, we'll find out.
I had a question for you. It was a good one.
Can't remember.
Yeah, couldn't go. We'll give you a chance. What would you? Is there anything you want to add to this?
You know, I think more than anything else, for me, Race Across America is one of the best vacations ever. It's the best way to completely get away from everything you have to worry about, whether it be work or church or family or politics or news or anything, because you're too exhausted and you're too focused to do anything else but just be focused on the race. And I think that's what I enjoy about the race. My wife has crewed for me twice, and then her and I were on the crew at the same time when I crewed in 2010, and that's kind of a neat thing to be able to share that with her, because there's not a lot of people out there that have been able to race across America as many times as I've been able to, and be able to have their wife there with them for 3 times now, and going on to 4th. The same thing with having my son Chris with me, my daughter Allie, and her husband Kyle. It's just kind of neat to be able to put it together in almost a little like not a family reunion, but just a family activity, something that we'll all share and that we'll be able to talk about for many, many years, is that 2014 Ram. But then the other thing, just anybody out there that's looking for a challenge, you don't have to be focused on doing a Ram to do a challenge. You don't even have to focus on doing 100 miles on your bike. Whatever it is you want to do, just get out and do it. If it's a 5K, then start working on a 5K. It doesn't have to be big and bold, but it just needs to be a start. And if a 5K is a big challenge, then work up to it, and eventually you'll be able to get it.
Perfect. That reminded me of my question. This is a setup question, 100% complete setup question.
All right.
What was the first race you ever did?
The first race I ever did was the Tour de Phoenix, which was 73 miles, I think is what it was, back in 99 or 2000. That was my first, I would say, race. Even though that's a charity event, they offer different medals for it, and that was my first race.
Gotcha. Well, the setup didn't work. I thought your first race was the Bucket of Blood races.
No, Bucket of Blood was probably one of the most fun races, though, but wasn't really my first. I guess, though, when you think about it, the Bucket of Blood, I mean, the charity ride that I was in really isn't technically a race. And so I guess when you think about it, the Bucket of Blood probably was my first race, because that's exactly what it was. You start, back then, the first time I rode Bucket of Blood, we started in the Painted Desert National Forest, and we raced 20-something miles into Holbrook, and really had a good time, and finished that. And I thought I was something special, and I found out within about 2 miles that I wasn't. and so I've done Bucket of Blood races, I don't know, half a dozen times. Always enjoyed them. In fact, what a lot of people don't realize, I guess you could really even say, the last time I did the Bucket of Blood races was 2 years ago, and I finished second in that race. And that was about 2 weeks after that 4-man Ram. And what a lot of people think was that all that training was really for Ram, but really it was training for the Bucket of Blood. Ram was just the final push, and then I had 2 weeks to taper into the Bucket of Blood race. So that's what this really all is. It's all just a cover for me to get ready for this year's Bucket of Blood.
Absolutely. And I plug the bucket if I could talk. I plug the Bucket of Blood races because this year's charity for the Bucket of Blood races is Friends of Freedom as well. And so a portion of everybody's entry fee into the Bucket of Blood races will go directly to the same charity as the Race Across America cause, as the Friends of Freedom. So if you're a racer and you like to, they're going to be a 10K, a half marathon, and a 20-mile bike race, and a portion of every entry will go back to Friends of Freedom from that as well.
Very good.
All right. Any last words?
Well, I guess the only last word is I hope everybody follows us on the Ram. If you've never followed a team before, I encourage you to do it once. It's always exciting. Everybody that's ever followed me has just loved it. In fact, after they follow it once, they always ask me, "Are you going to do it again next year so I can follow you again?" Because it really is. It's an exciting full week of racing where you can just follow. Like Kyle said, you go to bed at night at 9, 10 o'clock at night. You get up the next morning at 6 a.m. and we've gone through 2 or 3 time stations while you were asleep. So I encourage you to follow. I encourage you to go to our webpage, make a donation. That would be a wonderful thing, so that we could give back as much possible to the Friends of Freedom so that they can help those veterans.
With that, I promise to upload as many pictures and videos for you as we can to help that make it a little more enjoyable as you sit at home and try to watch that happen. Well, thanks for your time tonight, and we'll let you get back to your training routine.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.